Welcome back to the channel. You will note that I am on the runway at Wellesbourne in my Comanche, which means I passed my check ride. So it's the weekend, time to go on a trip. Coerce the wife into coming, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. But for now, we get to watch an appalling takeoff. Now this is not how to do it. Watch this drift left from the center line. Oh, shocking, shocking. Very forgiving runway at Wellesbourne. You'll see I've corrected the drift now, and a normal takeoff ensues. We are on our way to Brown Shutters Farm, which is a small grass farm strip based about 10 minutes south in a car of Bath. And the reason we are going to Bath is to see Robbie Williams. So, Robbie Williams. I've just passed my check ride. I want to fly as much as humanly possible, any excuse I can fathom to fly this aircraft. She says Robbie Williams is playing. We could fly down. And that was enough for me, I'm afraid. So here we are, climbing away at Wellesbourne on our way down to Brown Shutters Farm, for me to land on a very awkward runway in order for us to see Robbie Williams in concert. So a little bit about Brown Shutters Farm. It is a farm strip. It's about 525 meters long, which sounds like a lot. However, it has a probably 80 to 100 meter threshold, displaced threshold of its runway, and that unfortunately cuts the runway down quite significantly. The approach is over trees as well, so it is a bit of a tricky one, as you'll see later. Before we get too deep into the video, if you could like and subscribe to the channel, it would help with my ego mainly, and generate more content, so that would be amazing. Thank you very much. Those eagle-eyed viewers will notice the climb rate is significantly greater than you would get in a P828, and it does save a lot of time getting to those higher altitudes. There you can see just beneath the aircraft the 3618 runway that we took off from, and we are now sort of going up towards our climbing altitude, top of climb. During this flight, I decided to fly VFR on top, mainly because the weather is always a little less bumpy above the cloud layer, and the forecast, which I scrutinise heavily, was for this across the country. So I was more than happy to maintain my separation as I should do, but fly on top of the cloud layer. Now, as I previously mentioned in my first video, the whole purpose of this channel is to document the evolution of this aircraft into the 21st century. So as you can see, the panel that you're looking at there is very old-fashioned. Bar the Garmin 430, which is the little rectangular screen you can see in the middle, everything else is steam, old-fashioned gauges. So we will get a little bit more into that, but the aircraft actually has now been dropped off at Derby, where the Garmin dealers there will be completely gutting the panel and redoing everything. And please keep an eye out for some more updated videos of that process in due course. Talk a little bit about the speed of the Comanche, which is another discerning factor over the PA-28 family and some more trainer-based aircraft. I will comfortably get 145 knots of indicated airspeed, and I will be burning approximately 12 gallons per hour, depending on what altitude I'm at. Sort of 6,000–7,000 feet. Obviously, the higher up I get, the more I can lean the engine, and it's pretty capable when it comes to flying faster. talk a little bit about engine performance here as well. It's probably worth noting, if you look at the gauges over the P2 yoke, you'll see the RPM on top of the manifold pressure. Recently I've been flying 2300 RPM over 21.5 manifold pressure, which is what is stated in the pilot operating handbook when it comes to 65% power at 5,000 feet, and that will typically only burn about 11.5 gallons per hour. So it's not as thirsty as you'd imagine it to be. The flight was relatively uneventful, and it took us about 30 minutes to do the majority of the leg. And just before we descended into Brown Shutters Farm, the owner advised that we do a flyover just to inspect. And here is that flyover. You'll note the farm track that crosses the runway, and we were informed to keep an eye out for farm machinery, which is a little bit disconcerting, considering the size of them and the fact that it is a runway. But still, did the flyover, no problem at all. It was relatively quiet, and then I decided here you'll start to see me turn onto a crosswind to then sort of prep for landing. Now I'm going to be honest, as I mentioned slightly earlier in the video, there were an element of nerves involved here, purely because I've flown the PA-24 a few times, and I had landed on Wellesbourne's 475 metre grass strip a couple of times in practice. However, with Wellesbourne, I have a hugely flat area that I can come in, and if I get the approach slightly wrong, it's a lot more forgiving than Brown Shutters Farm. So to explain to you the layout of Brown Shutters Farm, I'll basically just verbatim quote the owner, and he said it's like a hot cross bun. And it is exactly that. It drips off. It's like the top of a hill, and the runways sort of bleed off down like in a downward slope on every angle. So as you come in, not only do you have this sort of rising ground in the displaced runway, which you'll see shortly, but in front of that you have trees, a main road, and power cables. So it's quite the interesting approach, and it was a little bit gusty. The wind was sort of coming sort of just off to the left-hand shoulder on runway 23, if I recall, and it did make for quite an interesting approach. Okay, so we're geared down, Gumps checks has been done, we've checked the fuel, we've checked the undercarriage, the mixture's all in, fuel pumps are all on, propellers pushed in, so we're at high RPM for a go around. So we're all ready to land. Now, during the base leg, which you can see now, it was very, very difficult to keep the runway in sight, purely because of the fact that the area is all green, there's no obvious landmarks, so it was a massive reliance actually on Sky Demon, just to keep eyes on where the runway would be. You can see me there gracefully leaning forward with that massive head of mine. It's actually not as big as that, I promise you. It's just the fact that it's caught in the outer edge of the picture, so it's all relatively in proportion, I promise. So at this stage, very nervous, because wife is the passenger, first time she's been in the aircraft, we're landing on grass, it's a bit gusty, approach is a bit tricky, and well, let's see how I get on. Okay, so we are on short final here. You can see the aircraft is moving around a fair amount as we come in close to the ground. Totally locked in at this stage. Huge amounts of concentration, huge amounts of back sweat. You can see the runway just there off that right pillar in the windshield, and you can see that row of trees that I was talking about that sit just before the threshold to the runway. A little bit of power in because that laminar wing will sink at low speeds, and you can see that displaced runway I was talking about. Nailed it. Not one to brag, not after that takeoff. But that was a very smooth landing, and it was at this stage the elation was passed on from myself to my wife, which shocked her slightly. She wasn't quite expecting me to confess how nervous I was about this, and I'm not sure she'd have actually got in the aircraft if I had told her how nervous I was about that. Little note about Brown Shutters Farm: the owner was amazingly friendly, super helpful when it came to sort of arranging us coming in. It was almost like a private service. He allowed me to park the aircraft overnight, so we had the pleasures of going to watch Robbie Williams, and he kept an eye on the aircraft. In fact, I forgot to put a small cover over one of the vents. I had his mobile number. He jumped straight out, went up to the plane, sorted it out for me, and the aircraft was in immaculate condition when we came back to it. So hugely grateful to Brown Shutters Farm for allowing us to stay there, and it was an all-round very memorable trip. So thanks for hanging around. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it was either enjoyable or informative. At least you can see now how not to take off an aircraft, and I hope you managed to stick around and subscribe for the journey. The avionics upgrade is next, and that will be done at Derby, and there'll be a few videos documenting that because the process will be over a 4 to 5 week period. So no flying for me for a little while, but I will be updating videos on here. So thanks very much. Really appreciate the time. Stay safe.